My name is James Labocki. I work in the Integrated Solutions Business Unit at Red Hat. So really what my focus is on is running a product management team that brings together OpenShift, OpenStack, CloudForms, a lot of the technologies you saw, focused on the user experience and the design of those products. So what I want to do is a really short amount of time, 30 minutes. Normally I like to do more like live demos and do all that sort of stuff with you guys. If you're interested in that after this, more than happy to give you guys demos of any of the scenarios we go through here. Talk to you in depth about more of the technology if you want, or some of our plans around it as well. So what I want to do real quick is just get started. The goal of the next 30 minutes is kind of to take you through some of the common use cases we're seeing in enterprises that we're working with references and very simple use cases that we're solving. So, but before I do that, I just want to just quick level set, 2-3 minutes here. So I'm curious, how many of you have heard of Kodak? All right, so how many of you have kids under the age of 12? All right, how many of them do you think know the name Kodak? Not too many of them, right? So 2004 stopped earning a profit, right? 2012 filed bankruptcy, and they got undercut by a bunch of organizations, whether it's Snapfish, Shutterfly. They may have invented the first social network for photo sharing and not realized it. They might have missed the digital camera, a bunch of kind of oopses. Second, so it's obvious everybody needs a competitive advantage. The second is that everyone's a software company. Everyone thinks of Google as a software company. The reality is that everyone's a software company. Exxon is a GIS company, Bank of America, transaction processing, Walgreens, electronic health records. And finally, your competition is everywhere. So when I say FedEx, what competition comes to mind? UPS? DHL? So I was fortunate enough to meet with some of the executives at FedEx a couple weeks back, and they're actually more worried about Amazon landing drones in your backyard, Walmart, who has 19,000 trucks in their fleet that could suddenly become a package delivery company, and Uber, who has 180,000 drivers that could suddenly deliver packages. So it's pretty apparent that there's a lot of competition entering new markets. Ironically, the folks at FedEx said what Amazon doesn't realize is when you make a drone large enough to carry packages, it becomes a 787, right? Which is what they're testing. So, all right. So that's pretty obvious. So second thing, this is basically putting a bunch of pressure on the organization. Lines of business, developers, operations. Lines of business need to do cheap experiments quickly. That means developers need higher productivity, and operations teams need to scale that globally. The last thing you want to do is deliver services quickly, but not be able to scale them if they're successful and become a victim of your own success. And the current performance is not that great. So this is from McKinsey & Company, a study on large-scale IT projects. 45% over on budget, 7% over on time, which doesn't seem that bad, but they're only delivering half the value in general. So the question is, how do you actually get better as an IT organization for delivering these things? And that's why cloud and DevOps are so popular. All these buzzwords: PaaS, infrastructure as a service, containers. The reason people are so interested in adopting these is because they believe they can help them deliver services faster, at scale, to market, to do these cheap experiments and enter new markets quickly. So we're seeing that this is actually the truth. This is not just like buzzwords and things like that. It actually does work. So this is the State of the DevOps report. I don't know, any of you follow Gene Kim or read the Phoenix Project? Anybody read that book? All right, you guys are going to have to be more interactive. Come on. How many of you read the Phoenix Project? All right, good. All right, so if you look at that, this is a State of the DevOps report that Gene Kim puts on. There's better deployment quality, increased release frequency, and better transparency once you start to embrace DevOps. So we know it works, but we also know that there's actually, whether you subscribe to Gartner or IDC or Forrester, whether it's second and third platform, bimodal, doesn't matter. There's different speeds of IT that these systems are working at. Some of your infrastructure and applications are focused on accuracy, might have a waterfall release process. Others are moving very quickly in a nonlinear mode. And so we've discovered that in existing applications and infrastructure and in new cloud-native applications and infrastructure, there's kind of 4 key use cases that we're focusing on at Red Hat and that we've been successful delivering with customers. And I kind of want to walk through each of those, give you a quick example, and then talk to you about some customers we've done this with. So the first challenge with existing applications is that we find that our customers struggle with slow delivery. So right now, their delivery of these applications can take weeks and weeks instead of an hour or minutes to deploy a new application environment. On top of that, their current infrastructure is just too complex. They don't know how many virtual machines they're running. They're struggling to keep up with it. They're non-standardized. Just just the weight of the existing infrastructure and the time they spend on it is just too high. As they look to build out new cloud-native applications, if all they do is take what they've done in the past and move it to the new world, those processes and those platforms are not agile enough to sustain a DevOps model. If my operations teams don't work with my developers today, and all I do is transfer that over and start using containers, it's not going to help. And then the fourth problem is that the infrastructure that they're running those new applications on is not scalable enough, both in terms of technical scalability, but also financial scalability, the types of hardware platforms they're using, and the way they operate them. So it scales at a linear model instead of an exponential model as far as operations cost. So I want to dive into each one of these. So slow delivery, accelerating delivery environments in minutes instead of days. How do we do this? I'm curious, how many of you today, you would say it takes more than a week to get a developer an environment in your organization? All right. So typically what we find, this is pretty typical flow. You have a developer making a request, and that request goes into a very talented operations team, and there's a whole flow behind that. And those operations teams basically ask what networks it should be on, all the standard questions. If you're a very sophisticated organization, maybe this is a service management console like ServiceNow, Remedy, something like that. If you're not, maybe it's email. If you're like me, you just go bring a beer to the operations team and say, hey, I need this done today. So it varies on what that interface looks like. But the bottom line is that all those tasks add up to take a long, long time, and doing them manually, and they're sucking up your most valuable resources, which is not good. This is pretty simple. Head of operations basically hearing that they're slowing time to market for services that need to be delivered. So how do we solve this problem? Well, the way we solve this problem is we empower a service designer, and that service designer could basically work with your developers to understand what stacks they want to deploy, and then work with all the constituents in operations, including virtual infrastructure administrators, security operations teams, to basically develop a catalog item. And that catalog item could be linked into your existing service management solution. And that could basically be hooked to automation, whether that's Chef, Puppet, Ansible, any number of those things. And then it could be provisioned across a hybrid cloud environment. So in this way, you still have all the ability to have self-service all the control that the operations teams need. But those operations resources are no longer, going through the mundane task of doing this. So self-service with automation, we're finding this kind of everywhere. I'm curious, raise your hand if this is something that you guys are pursuing now or want to pursue in the next 6 months. Okay. So surprisingly, a lot of times we talk to organizations and, we're talking containers and microservices and scalable infrastructure and all these things. Still, 90% of organizations have not done everything they could to automate their existing infrastructure. So the goal here is basically reducing all that time and getting the developer the stack faster, taking rid of queuing time. And we found that we're actually able to do this pretty well. So there's two customers, two quick ones. Union Bank, they're actually a West Coast bank. It used to take them weeks to deliver applications, now down to just a few hours. They will actually provision their physical hardware the same way. So they'll roll in a rack of Cisco UCS hardware. They'll spin that up with Pixie Boot and Cobbler and all that stuff, and then pull that into their service management console. So they'll actually provision the underlying infrastructure for their cloud the same way. Able, they're here actually in the APAC region here, 95% faster provisioning. All right, so I'll dive into the second one. Second one is complexity. So if we look inside of most infrastructures today, there's a lot of hidden complexity that we can help solve. So if you look at most virtual infrastructure administrators, they have existing virtualization. That's shown by this very large price tag at the top, so you could guess the vendor. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so you might have one cluster that's running very hot, one cluster that's running very slow. A lot of, maybe those workloads are over-provisioned. So are there any database administrators in the room? Okay, so database administrators, in my experience, always ask for a terabyte of storage and then use 50 megs, right? So, because they just don't want to ask you twice. So finding out those workloads, finding non-compliant workloads, those sorts of things is a real issue. The second is a lot of people are exploring private clouds. They want to build a scale-out private cloud, but they want to move workloads onto there, but they don't know which workloads they can move onto there. So can I move a relational database onto there? Do I need persistent storage? Can I move my Tomcat workloads? Those sorts of questions. And finally, as they begin to use public cloud, they want to make sure that they get the most bang for their buck. They don't want to put workloads on regions that are far away. If I'm in Sydney, I don't want to spin up instances in Tokyo where it's more expensive region, and there's high latency. So we can help here. The way we do this is by instituting a cloud management platform. So again, I'm trying to not, I know you guys probably love to hear about Red Hat products, right? But try not to just stay away from them and just kind of give you guys the overview of how we do this. So we have a management platform that can actually assist with more efficiently running your existing virtual infrastructure. So it's agentless. You can actually drop this appliance in, discover your entire environment. With no agents, you can actually introspect virtual machine disks. So finding machines that are over-provisioned or maybe susceptible to Heartbleed, those sorts of security vulnerabilities. You could do that with the cloud management platform. Second thing is we have a methodology for actually migrating workloads between existing infrastructure and new scale-out private clouds. So if you want to be able to migrate, say, all your Tomcat workloads over from existing proprietary virtualization platform over to an open one, we can help you with that. And finally, we can also help with public cloud. So we can actually help balance public cloud to reduce your spend of public cloud or provide better showback and compliance across it. So these are kind of three very simple areas on the infrastructure side. So who have we done this with? We've done this with two companies. One is a large leading loyalty programs provider, increasing their utilization in their infrastructure from 30 to 50%. So most infrastructures aren't utilized that heavily. They were actually able to drive increased use of the infrastructure. And there's a large global credit card company that we've worked with. To date, we've migrated over 12,000 virtual machines of the 70,000 that they have on a proprietary platform over to OpenStack. So this is actually migrating the workloads over as well as re-architecting a lot of their applications to be container-based. All right, so I'll dive into the third one. I'm actually staying on pretty good track. Normally I would break out into each one of these and show you guys a demo, but we don't have time for that. More than happy to send you them. Follow up with me. I'll give you guys whatever you need to kind of dive deeper into each of these areas. So the third one, agility. One of the things we found is that the current way application development happens is not very agile. So we often find siloed teams inside of organizations. This might be a UI team, an app dev team, and a database team. And they generally develop a monolithic application. The release is one big release. And the problem that we found is that, there's a couple problems with that, but one of the big problems is that operations has no idea how to handle that release as well. So when that release comes over, it's basically a big monolithic thing that with a 500-page manual and a 10-gig binary, and then here it is on Friday evening, have a nice weekend, and your operations team basically has to work there. I'm not bitter. I came from an IT operations background, but maybe a little bitter. But this is not good, right? These poor people have families. So the question is, how do you actually take this and fix this problem? If you look at the heads of development, they want to break down those layers so that they can scale them independently, release them independently, and really reduce their cycle time. Cycle time being, I make a code change and I get all the way to production faster. So here, our methodology for this is pretty simple. Again, DevOps is not a product, so there is culture and process change that has to happen here. We work with a lot of partners in that space particularly. But what we do is we empower people to build cross-functional teams that include operations right out of the get-go. We can help them build microservices-based applications, so container-based applications on, say, OpenShift that leverage a continuous integration and delivery pipeline. All the while, we still empower the operations teams to view all this. So there's a couple big differences here. And a lot of people are talking about containers and microservices. One of the key things that we're working on is actually being able to connect these container-based applications down to the infrastructure. So not everything in the world is going to be a 12-factor stateless application in your environment. So things like persistent storage, we can actually help with that. So for example, if you have a database workload that requires persistent storage, leveraging OpenShift and OpenStack together, we can map Cinder volumes from OpenStack up to your container-based workloads to provide persistent storage. On the operations side, we actually provide that operations person can actually have a view allowing the developer to push all the way to production if you want, and the operations teams can still see inside of it. So if we, like I said, we don't have the time here, but I'm happy to give you guys a demo showing a complete, a code change going from source to image, basically, and provisioning that new container-based app, while CloudForms on the management side could actually still see all the contents of that container and understand what Docker container image that came from for a compliance standpoint. So basically, it's empowering your developer to do their job, but still allowing operations to maintain compliance. So We've done this with a couple of organizations. So FICO, I don't know if any of you have heard of FICO. They're the credit scoring in the U.S. So in the U.S., if you don't have a credit score, you're not breathing, apparently. So like no, I'm kidding. But so they had a analytics platform that they do credit risk analysis, and it was all behind kind of their own firewall for most of it, right? So you actually had to, if you wanted to get access to data as a partner of FICO, you had to go connect over some sort of EDI with them. And they basically took that entire analytics platform and with OpenShift made it a SaaS platform. So now it's exposed to all their end users. They had a bunch of benefits out of there. And Cisco, so Cisco's IT organization has, I think it's close to 10,000 Java developers. And what they built was something called a lightweight application environment, which would allow their developers to get access to environments to do development. So they saw similar benefits of being able to get environments that are developers faster and get code tested quicker. But the most interesting thing with Cisco is that I thought was interesting was that it gave them a window into like basically forecasting what their developers wanted. So from an operations team's perspective, they began to see that Node.js became very popular inside of OpenShift. So they began to forecast and say, okay, if all these new students are coming out of university that we're hiring, and they all want to use Node.js, how are we going to operationalize this in our production environment? And so it allowed them to kind of get a window into the future of what to expect. All right, so you sped up your existing infrastructure, your application delivery. You've made your existing infrastructure more efficient. You've now modernized some of your development, so you're doing like container-based pipelines. The last piece is really how do you get towards a more scalable infrastructure underneath there? So the last thing you want is you develop these really cool microservices-based apps, but then you can't scale them out. So there's really kind of two sides of this. We have scale-up infrastructure, and the problem with scale-up infrastructure is basically as you, maybe you guys have experienced this, as it grows, it becomes more and more expensive. So it becomes financially and technically unsustainable. There's a limited cluster size that you can build to. Software licensing becomes prohibitively expensive. Storage frames, fancy networking gear, all that stuff adds up. But you also have to get an administrator for every cluster or every series of clusters, right? So you have basically one administrator, 10 hosts, 2 administrators, 20 hosts, 3 administrators, 30 hosts, somewhere in that range. And you actually want to get to where it's 1 administrator for 10 hosts, 2 administrators for 100 hosts, 3 administrators for 1,000 hosts. And to do that, you need more programmatic infrastructure. So people then look at scale out. And what we found is that scale out's great. It's beautiful, right? Like how many of you guys, I'm curious, how many of you are looking at OpenStack or playing around with it okay. So OpenStack's a thing of beauty, right? Like all these asynchronous services. The problem is like when you actually like go try and consume upstream code, it's complex, right? It's not your core business to sit there and maintain enterprise product out of that. So that's one problem with kind of the DIY approach to scale out infrastructure. The other thing is it's missing a lot of the functionalities that enterprises need. So things like chargeback and rich self-service, quotas, approvals, capacity utilization forecasting, compliance, control policies. So here, what we found is that we can actually deliver something that meets this need of having a scale-out cloud with all those enterprise features. So in this case, what we provide is the ability with Red Hat OpenStack platform to actually have multi-site, highly available OpenStack deployments. So let's say you have a deployment of OpenStack platform in New York, London, and Tokyo, but that's not enough, right? Because you actually still need all those enterprise management features to basically bring those all together. And so here, CloudForms, our cloud management platform, actually can federate across that and provide things like chargeback, self-service, audit, and the like. So, just jump right to it. So there's two customers here. So one of them is a leading healthcare provider in North America, and they were actually able to build a private cloud in this exact manner. This other one is actually a large European bank, so that's actually common knowledge now. So they're actually contributing to the ManageIQ project, which is the upstream project for our cloud management platform. That's Banco Santander. There's an IT organization called Protobon, who actually is their IT arm of the bank. And they are one of the largest Red Hat cloud infrastructure customers today. So they have a 6 data center rollout of multi-site, highly available OpenStack. that's tied together with cloud forms for things like chargeback, compliance, and control policies. They're actually doing some really interesting stuff around hyperconverged Ceph and Nova compute, which isn't exactly supported yet. So the idea is that they've gone from a maturity model of just consuming open source to actually contributing back. So they're working with us upstream in our cloud management platform to develop some of the chargeback capabilities for our cloud platform. All right. So I'm curious, now that I got to there, how many of you would say, like on those 4 use cases, how many of you on the first side, accelerating like delivery of self-service and automation, how many of you would say you're in that, you guys are actively doing that right now or wanting to do that? Okay. How about the optimization side as far as migrating workloads between platforms or making them more efficient? So trying to like migrate workloads, okay. How about continuous integration and deployment of container-based workloads? How many of you are there? All right, and then the fourth one, deploying multi-site OpenStack with like chargeback. Anybody? Okay, thanks. I always like to see like who's doing what. All right, so just to kind of close out, maybe we actually have a couple of minutes for questions here. I'm actually moving pretty quick. So there's no doubt in our mind that like open source is driving all this. There's not proprietary stuff going on in the world of DevOps and containers. Everybody kind of knows that. But I think the one main thing that we're focused on is that we find that people basically have had almost 2 choices up until now. And the first is that we all know they want the upstream innovation. They want all that open source innovation. The problem is that takes a large engineering investment, right? It's difficult to integrate all those disparate projects. You don't get a stable life cycle. So the problem with going directly upstream to an open source community is you don't get all the things you need. Input in new features, enterprise support, all those things. Most people get that. The other problem is that as you bring these layers together, so a container application platform, infrastructure, software-defined storage, management, all these different pieces, we've also heard that people want an integrated solution to that stuff. So they don't want to have to put all that together themselves. The problem with most integrated solutions that we found is that they have a really, really high price tag. The innovation is often vendor controlled, and there's a high exit cost due to a proprietary model. So all those things that you want in those open source communities, you end up not getting them. Or if you get them, they're wrapped in proprietary stuff, right? We'll give you OpenStack, but we'll wrap it in proprietary management. Or we'll give you, container-based workloads, but we'll put some, a specific, it only works on a specific hardware platform. Or you can use this, but it only works on a single cloud. And our goal, really, from our solution standpoint, is really to bring those 2 things together, both integration and open source innovation, to solve those problems. So with that is really the point of Red Hat Cloud Infrastructure and Red Hat Cloud Suite, is really integrating these things together and making sure that they solve those 4 problems, but doing them in a way that is completely open source. There's no proprietary solutions. They bring across a large ecosystem of hardware and software vendors, and they help you do this the right way. So just to close out here, if you look at what's in Red Hat Cloud Infrastructure today, this is what it includes. It includes both Red Hat Enterprise or Red Hat Virtualization, which is our scale-up virtualization platform based on RHEL KVM, and OpenStack, so you can run either of those. So we find a lot of organizations want to split this out. So they buy RHCI, then they say, some of these I'm going to run a scale-up RHEL KVM virtualization platform, so I can land my workloads that need persistent storage and HA and all these things on there. And then they might take some of their subscriptions and actually run OpenStack as well. It also includes CloudForms, which is the cloud management platform that I mentioned. That helps with things like chargeback and orchestration, control policies. It's a cloud management platform. It also helps with migrating workloads and providing a self-service portal and linking it to automation. And Satellite is our systems management tool for managing Red Hat Enterprise Linux. All this, of course, is built on top of RHEL, and the management tooling extends to support both other virtualization platforms like VMware and Hyper-V, all the way out to public cloud providers like Azure, GCP, and AWS. But with Red Hat Cloud Suite, what we've done is we've actually integrated OpenShift into this as well. So now you can actually run OpenShift across all of these platforms to basically bring that together. So whether you're running VM-based workloads or container-based workloads, you could run them with Red Hat Cloud Suite. And CloudForm's actually, the management plane for this is all completely integrated. So if you start with an OpenStack environment and layer OpenShift on top of it, you can actually add CloudForms into both of those. You can now start to get visibility from an operations perspective across both your containers and your VMs all the way to your physical infrastructure in your data center. So the last thing I'll touch on is that we often get people who say, hey, how do I get started with this? And in one of those use cases. And what we found is a lot of times people spend a huge amount of time up front just getting the infrastructure set up, just getting the tool chain set up to try this, right? So I want to develop a new microservices-based application. Well, first I need to buy the servers, and then I need to rack them and stack them. Then I got to get an infrastructure installed. Then I have to get this going. Then I got to talk to my developers, and they want to use Cucumber for behavior-driven development, and they want to use JUnit, and they want to use Nexus and Maven. By the time you know it, you've spent a month and a half just getting all the tool chains built around your DevOps tool chain. And then by then, like, your developer's already changed his mind. He wants to use something cool that just came out. So in that spirit, we've created something called Open Innovation Labs. And really what this is it's a residency-style consulting engagement from Red Hat where your developers and operations teams can work with us and bring your theory to us, and we will prove it out in our labs. So we have something called push-button infrastructure in that lab. We'd be happy to show you a quick demo, or if you just Google Red Hat Open Innovation Labs, there's a quick infographic that shows you how this works. Basically, you can come in and choose any of the DevOps tools you want, and from day one, when you come in, we will basically have that environment ready for you, all automatedly deployed, and you could begin doing development, and your operations teams can be there in the same room, working with your developers, and we have core contributors with them. So this is just a really a way to kind of kickstart getting a project started that's focused on app dev, and then figuring out how to bring it on premise later. So this is just kind of, let's test it out, let's get this app running, and then you can figure out how to bring it on prem later. So with that was the fastest I've ever delivered that presentation. So if you guys have any questions, I got 2.5 minutes, so I'd be happy to take them. Any questions? Oh, come on. I didn't bring anything to give away, that's the problem, huh? Okay, well, thanks very much. I'll be around and happy to show you guys some demos if you want. Thanks.